Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. This overlook that I'm headed to right now, I've never actually been to this location before. I've seen many images online, but I just knew that this was going to be the perfect location to perform this type of a comparison. But when I first came upon the actual overlook and kind of walked out towards the edge, I was just completely floored and mesmerized by its grandiose nature, and I just knew that this was going to be the perfect location. So I decided to start with the Fuji GFX100s, which is a 102 megapixel medium format camera. And one of the reasons why I felt this location would be so great for this comparison is because there's so much interest in detail along the canyon floor. There's winding roads and tons of boulders and trees, and just a lot of things that we can really zoom in and pixel peep, if you will, to really do a kind of a side-by-side comparison from a resolution perspective for both of these types of cameras. So after taking a few exposures with the GFX100s, I carefully removed it from the tripod. I wanted to make sure I didn't bump my tripod at all, thus altering the overall composition, and replaced the camera with the Fuji X-T4, which is a 26.1 megapixel APS-C or crop sensor camera. I went ahead and dialed in all my settings, and I used different focus points throughout the overall composition just to ensure I had a little bit of variety. And you may hear some people in the background, as this is a very popular spot for people to arrive early in the morning to watch the sun rise. After taking a few more exposures with the X-T4 just to ensure that I have all the information captured that I need for this comparison, I decided to pack things up and start to head my way back down the mountain to where I left my vehicle. So as you can see, I am back from my trip to Utah, which was absolutely incredible. I had a real blast and ended up coming away with quite a few images that I'm really excited about. I'm looking forward to diving into those and editing those further and sharing them with you all in the coming weeks. And I was able to do something on this trip that I did not originally think was going to happen. And a big thanks to Ryan Smith for making this opportunity happen for me. But he was able to take me down to hike the Narrows, which is something that I've always wanted to do, and I just have never had the opportunity to do it until now. And it was everything that I thought it would be. So a big thanks to Ryan for making that happen. That's something that I will absolutely never forget, and came away with quite a few photographs that I'm really proud of. So, but over the I guess past month or so since I've been using the Fuji GFX100s, I got a ton of questions in regards to doing a comparison with another camera. And as you saw in the previous video clips, that's exactly what I did, comparing the Fuji GFX100s to the Fuji X-T4. This is my X-T3. I'm filming on my X-T4 right now, but they're basically identical sizes and everything like that. But medium format, something that was never really on my radar until this camera came out. And as you can tell, it's a very small medium format camera. It's not much bigger than the Fuji X-T3 and the Fuji X-T4. And it is a little bit heavier, but for a medium format camera, it's right in line with a lot of the pro size full frame cameras. So that's what really piqued my interest. But you know, if you've been following this channel for any amount of time, you know that I'm not a real spec guy. I read specs on things, but I don't really take it all for, I guess, at face value. Sure, the specs of things are nice to get kind of like a baseline as to whether or not something should perform better than something else. But I care more about real world experience. Can I see the difference? Because on paper, sure, a medium format will almost always beat a crop sensor camera on paper. But can you really see the difference? Can you see that perceived value with your naked eye? And if you can't, then that's not really worth a whole lot to me. But if you can, then that kind of gets me a little bit excited. So I wanted to put it to the test, and I wanted to go over those results right now. So let me just put these cameras to the side. So right here, and as you can see, both of these images were captured using the same settings. This is the Fuji GFX100s, the medium format camera. This is the Fuji X-T4, which is a APS-C or crop sensor camera. And the only difference between the settings here is that the X-T4 the base ISO is 160 and the GFX100s is 100. Let me just make these larger on the screen. So as you can see, identical settings for the most part. And probably the first thing that might jump out to you is the aspect ratio. This is the medium format. This is the APS-C crop sensor. And the medium format has a 4:3 aspect ratio. So 4 inches across for the width, 3 inches for the height. APS-C has a 3:2, so 3 inches for the width and 2 inches for the height. And when I first started using the GFX100s, it took some getting used to from a compositional perspective, but I really do enjoy this aspect ratio. It's more of a square aspect ratio as opposed to a rectangular aspect ratio. And I've encountered quite a few compositional, I guess, situations, if you will, that this aspect ratio really helped me in. So I do enjoy this aspect ratio, but that's kind of the very first thing that really jumps out to you is the difference right through here. Now, of course, a medium format camera, in theory, it should absolutely have better dynamic range than a crop sensor camera. And you can really see this right here. These are both completely raw photos. There's no editing done to these. And you can see that the crop sensor camera handled this image a little bit different than the medium format over here. You can see that the highlights up through here are much brighter than over here on the GFX100s. So the medium format absolutely handled the shadows and the highlights in this particular image much better than the X-T4. And that's not that big of a surprise. And probably something else that shouldn't be a big shock is the overall resolution. 102 megapixel medium format camera versus a 26 megapixel crop sensor camera. This has, what is that for? Yeah, 4 times the resolution than this camera, than the Fuji X-T4, or 3 in this one. But so it's not a big surprise. There should be a lot of additional resolution. So let's do a little bit of pixel peeping, and we're really going to do some diving in here because this is a very grand scene, and the areas that we're going to be zooming into have got to be maybe a mile away, maybe not quite a mile, but it's extremely far away. So let me first zoom into this area right through here. This is the Fuji GFX100s on the left, and we're going to zoom into a similar region on the crop sensor the Fuji X-T4. And is that close? That's maybe even a little bit more, honestly. Something about right there, I think, looks good. And as you can see, there is a dramatic difference. Let me turn my screen brightness up a little bit. So you can see that there's a substantial amount of additional resolution on the Fuji GFX100s versus the X-T4. The X-T4 almost looks like it's out of focus, but that is to be expected. And honestly, I kind of expected the GFX100s to have, or I should say, I figured that there'd be even a larger discrepancy between the two. I mean, it's very obvious that the GFX100s has more resolution. There's another cool area up here where there's some traffic cones where you can really see the difference. Let me set this up here. So there's that there. Let me find that same area over here. Here it is. Let's kind of line this up as good as I can. So you can really see all of the traffic cones right here. You can see there's a distinct break between them all, and you can clearly see that they are traffic cones. But if you look at the X-T4 version, you really can't even make out what that is. So I think that's another great representation of how much additional resolution is in the 102 megapixel sensor versus the 26 megapixel sensor. But when you zoom all the way out, you know, people don't look at images like that usually. But when you look at it like this, there's not that big of a difference. So the majority of my work, sure, I do print some, but most of my work is shared on Instagram, Facebook, social media, websites. And honestly, I don't really know if you'll see a huge difference, but where you can see a difference is in the tonality and the color rendition of the medium format versus the crop sensor camera. A good way to think about tonality, I heard, is, and this kind of really resonated with me, is if, and these are just made up numbers, if you have a 1-inch sensor, that sensor has to cover areas of pure black all the way to pure white on a 1-inch sensor. Now, if that same sensor is, say, 4 or 5 inches in length or width, now that 4 or 5 inch sensor has 4 or 5 inches to go from pure black to pure white, which ultimately means that that transition zone is much more gradual. So you have more shades of gray, more shades of black, more shades of white. So you have more tonal separation and greater tonal values or tonality in a photograph. And you can really kind of see that right here. You can definitely see it in the color. So there's an area right up here where, let me kind of go to this region up through here. And you can definitely see the difference in the colors. You know, the GFX100s over here, let me zoom in a little bit more. It definitely has better, I should just say more colors. You get more of a color roll off between colors. And that's something that I was definitely looking forward to seeing. You can really see it all right through here. And I have a couple of these images edited as well. So let me just exit here and go to those images, this one and this one, and we'll compare these two. So the image on the left is the GFX100s. The image on the right is the Fuji X-T4. And let's go back to that same area again on both of these images. And you can see that the GFX100s definitely has more, or I should say deeper colors, more vibrant colors. And these images are edited the same exact way. So there's not one image that has more vibrance or saturation than the other. But there definitely seems to be a better, I guess, tonal range and color rendition from the medium format camera than the crop sensor camera. There's another area over here that I felt was a good representation of this. Let me just zoom out of here and go to that same region right through here. And you can just see on the crop sensor camera here, it's just, you don't get quite as many different colors of red and oranges in the dirt as you do right through here. So this just seems to be a little bit more washed out. And this right here, you get tons of different reds and magenta hues and oranges and deep reds versus maybe reds that are not quite as deep. So you just get a better color rendition on the Fuji GFX100s, which is not a real big surprise. It's a medium format camera utilizing a much larger sensor. So I thought that was pretty interesting to see. But once again, when you zoom all the way out, you know, both of these are fully edited versions. The only difference that I really see between the two of these is, you know, besides the aspect ratio, is that the colors in the GFX100s seem to be a little bit more punchy, a little bit more vibrant, and there just seems to be more tonal separation between certain colors than the Fuji X-T4 does. Another cool example here, I wanted to just shoot an image with the medium format that was extremely underexposed. As you can see right here, you can look up here at the histogram and see how underexposed this is, because I really wanted to see how much detail I could bring out of the shadows. And if I bring this all the way up to 100, you can really see the difference of how much shadow recovery is actually there. But perhaps what's most important is not how much shadow recovery is, but how clean that shadow recovery is and how noise-free it is, because you could have a ton of shadow recovery, but if it's super noisy, that's not a real big benefit. But all through here, you can just really see that there's just not a ton of noise anywhere in these darker regions of this photograph. So I felt that that was extremely impressive, and it's one of the things that I was most impressed about is the amount of shadow recovery and how clean that shadow recovery actually is or was. So I felt that that was a real good kind of a real world comparison that's going to help me to ultimately make my decision as to whether or not I want to move forward with purchasing the Fuji GFX100s and switching from the Fuji X-T3 and the X-T4 series. So like I mentioned, those are the kind of things that are important to me as to whether or not I can actually see it with my naked eye versus just reading a spec sheet and just saying, oh yeah, this is going to be better than this because the specs say so. But if I can't see it, does it really matter? Is it really worth the switch or worth the additional money? So definitely helped me out, and I will be making my buying decision here in the next couple of weeks, or I just got to send this camera back, which would be very sad to do. So I do hope that that was some interesting information that might help you out if you're possibly thinking about switching from maybe a full frame to a crop sensor, or crop sensor to medium format, or whatever sensor change you might be possibly contemplating in the future. So before I do wrap things up here, I do just want to say a real quick thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a dynamic and attractive online platform to create your website. You can display your photography using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs and customize the layout and look and feel of your gallery just so you can make it your own. With Squarespace's traffic overview feature, you can track trends in page visits and views to better optimize your content, and you can even grow and engage with your customers with Squarespace's email campaign tools, which will enable you to create engaging emails that match your website with your products or blog post and logo, just so your messaging remains consistent. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So as always, I really do appreciate you watching this week's video. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as possible. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could give it that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And as always, I really do appreciate you watching this week's video, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.